Hey everybody, Eric Songer here with you and another edition of the Second Floor Therapy Podcast. So glad you could join us again this week during the summer of 2018. Instead of doing my usual podcast that I do during the school year called What's Happening in the CMSW Band Department, I talk a little bit about issues in middle school music education and not just music, but education in general. And so I've been doing this now for about 3 or 4 weeks, and once a month, I take a week off to do my other podcast called The Hits Don't Stop, which you can find on iTunes. And that's a really cool podcast where I take a look at the top 40 songs from this week, 30, 35, 25 years ago, and then see what those artists are doing now, and also kind of reflect back on what was going on in pop culture back in that day. So you can check out The Hits Don't Stop on iTunes as well as my Google Drive site. But this is Second Floor Therapy, and today's topic is music and athletics and the ability for students to do both. And I just want to go and give you a little personal story because I think my opinion and my thoughts on the matter are really based on what I've been through in my life. And so I'm not trying to say that this is how it should be, but I think when you hear a little bit about how I grew up, you might get an idea of why I feel the way I do about this. So my passions as a child and as a middle school and high school student definitely revolved around two things, and that would be music and sports. And they were two huge parts of my childhood. As far as the music goes, when I was in fifth grade, I became a huge listener of popular music and was very into popular music to the point of where every week I wrote a magazine called Rocket about the different kinds of music that were popular each week, looking at the charts, looking at the artists that made the music, pop culture, and I wrote this weekly magazine all the way into high school. And when I got into high school, my love of music went beyond popular music. I started to really enjoy jazz and classical music as well. Concert band music I enjoyed playing in band and jazz band, and I definitely got into DJing and a collector of music and started analyzing different genres of music, and that led into becoming a music major when I got to college. My love of sports, even though I'm a music teacher, and you might say, well, music was much more important, I wouldn't say so. I grew up loving to play sports. I played soccer like many kids did when I was little. I got into baseball, really enjoyed playing baseball, enjoyed playing basketball, and played basketball well into my teenage years. And when I got to middle school, started to really enjoy the game of golf, and played on the golf team when I was in high school, and always was a bowler, even though not maybe the number one popular sport in the world. Really became a serious bowler. Got to the point where my average was in the 190s, would consistently bowl in the 200s, and really took it seriously to the point where I did consider at one point, Pro Bowlers Tour as an option for me. So, in addition to playing sports, an avid sports watcher. I was really into watching the NBA, watching the NFL, Major League Baseball, and even dabbled in writing a magazine like I did for music in the world of sports too. So really enjoyed the world of sports, and I loved being in the marching band in high school, and I was one of those probably few students that whether marching band or not marching band went to the football games because I really wanted to see how the team did, and I intently watched the game. And I think it was my sophomore year, our football team went in one state, and that was huge, and that was so much fun to be on that journey. And I loved playing at the basketball games, and would go to the other sporting events as well. So grew up a huge sports fan, an athlete, grew up a huge music fan and a musician, and that has continued into my adult years. Obviously, I'm a music teacher. I think music education is so important for every child. And I also am a firm believer in being involved in athletics. I have two kids, and both my kids, I really believe that I want both of them to be involved in the fine arts and be involved in an athletic event of some sort throughout their high school days. And I've really been proud of both my kids for doing that. My son, who's going into 8th grade, plays saxophone. He plays in the band. He plays in the jazz band. He takes lessons. And then he's also very into basketball and plays basketball, in-house basketball, plays during just some camps in the summer. And he's also really getting involved in doing golf now this summer too, which is really cool. And my daughter is taking piano lessons and is loving that, likes to write her own music. She's going into 2nd grade, by the way. And she also is trying out all sorts of sports. And she's done gymnastics, she's done figure skating, she's done lacrosse, she's done dance, and another artistic thing, she just did her first theater camp. So I'm really proud of my kids for doing those things and being involved in both. And they both have different levels of interest when it comes to the arts and it comes to sports, but I think it's important for them to do both regardless. And that's where my first take is here today, that, you know, we live in a culture that when you get into the teenage years, music and the arts is not always a required thing to do in school. And even physical education in some schools gets phased out, and kids don't have to be involved in that. And in our middle school, how it works in our district is that there is one period a day that is solely assigned for music and for Phi Ed. And it works on an A day, B day system where kids can do one on the A day and one on the B day. And a lot of kids do take a music class, whether that be band, choir, or orchestra on one day, and then Phi Ed on another day. And that's fantastic. So throughout middle school, they are getting the experience of doing both of those. But unfortunately, that's probably just half to 2/3 of our students are doing both. Which means the other 1/3 to half, most of that other segment is doing just Phi Ed and getting no music at all. And then there's a smaller segment that is doing all music and no Phi Ed. And I worry about both of those groups. And I was just thinking today as I saw a mom of one of the students at my school, and she was talking about how her one child who's at the middle school now does the everyday Phi Ed and just really isn't into the arts, and that her next child coming up will quite possibly be the opposite and want to do 2 of the arts classes and not do the Phi Ed. And and she said, and I get it, that her first child really doesn't really have any interest in arts and loves the sports, and her other child's the opposite. And it just got me to thinking once again, and I've thought this a lot, that how much should the interest level dictate what they're involved in at the age of 11, 12, 13 years old? It's interesting. We don't usually look at this the way I'm about to say it, but we should. We require every student to take math and English and science and social studies every year of school through pretty much junior, if not senior year of high school, because we value those subjects and we deem those, by the way we set up the requirements, whether we come out and say it or not, we deem those the most important. And by no means am I saying that those subjects aren't important. I mean, my goodness sakes, English, we need everyone to be able to read. We need people to be able to write and communicate. We need that in our culture. The last thing we need are more people who are illiterate and aren't able to do such basic things. But with that said, how many kids, if given the choice, wouldn't take those things if we gave them the option, like we do with the arts and like we do with Phi Ed? And maybe I should ask the question this way: how many parents would say, oh, you know what, you're not really good at math, I'm not going to have you take math, instead I'm going to have you do double English? I don't know if that's a great idea, and it's such not a good idea that schools don't give you that option. But I'd like to just put that to this and say, you know what, I don't think it's a good idea that we're letting kids choose one of these over the other. And, as an example of that, a lot of these kids who take Phi Ed every day, they're also involved in sports year round, whether it's one single sport or multiple sports. they're getting a lot of physical education outside of school. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't take any Phi Ed in school, because Phi Ed in school is more than just learning a sport and learning how to play on a team, although that's a part of it. It's also about being, aerobic activity, learning how to take care of your body, live a healthy lifestyle. Health is part of that component. So, but what I'm getting at is that these kids who are also involved a lot after school in physical activity, by all means, they should be taking one of those music classes in addition to their Phi Ed, so that they can develop that creative side. In fact, in some ways, these are the kids that need that creative development more than the kids who are asking for it, because these kids feel like they don't have the talent, they don't have the passion, they don't have the desire. Well, let's develop that. Let's develop that creativity. Let's develop that appreciation for the arts. Let's develop those skills that music and visual arts develop in kids. And so I feel very adamant about that, that we shouldn't be depriving these kids of fine arts education simply because they don't seem to have an interest or an aptitude to do it, just like we have kids taking math and English that might also struggle in those areas too. So that's a big thing. And I think the opposite is obviously true too, that these kids that take music year round, I mean, it's great that they want to do that and be involved in different musical ensembles. But a lot of times these are the kids that aren't involved in a sport or any physical activity after school. So not only are they not getting the physical activity during school, but they're also not getting it after school. So those things are disturbing to me. Um, I think another thing that's disturbing to me are the way that the kids choose this. So, like this past year, well, I already mentioned how sometimes kids choose it, or parents choose it for their kids based on what their aptitude and passion is. And so I already addressed how I don't really agree with that. But the other thing is that kids are making decisions on these groups based on where their friends are going. I have a couple kids right now, and they are not the first couple. This happens every year. But I have a couple kids right now that are not going to be in music because they want to be with their friends in the everyday Phi Ed class. And if they don't take the everyday Phi Ed class, then they're in the every other day Phi Ed class, which their closest friends aren't in. And so they are making that decision based on friends, and their parents are allowing them to do that. I don't know why. Maybe because that they feel like they're not, these particular kids aren't that passionate about their music, and so they're like, yeah, just go ahead. You don't need to be in music anymore. Take the everyday Phi Ed. Um, I have a hard time thinking that these parents are allowing them to do it simply because their friends are, but it wouldn't shock me that that happens too. So it's really unfortunate that that's happening as well, that decisions are being made. And it's funny, that the two kids that I'm thinking about, these couple kids are really good musicians. Now, they're not practicing every day, and they're not going down the path of becoming a professional musician or anything. And that's not the point. I mean, most kids aren't going to become professional musicians in our middle school. But the point is that they're loving music. They're loving the experience. They're getting better at the music. They're learning more about creativity, teamwork through music, problem solving, perseverance. They're learning all sorts of skills. They're getting incredible experiences through our music program. And they're dumping that simply because they want to be with their friends. I just have an issue with that. And they have so much of an issue with it too, I think, that they won't even tell me that, although it's painfully obvious. But that's just not a good situation. So I'd like you all who are listening to this just to think about the importance of both music, the arts, and then also athletics and physical education in your kids' lives, and to make sure that they're getting both. They're both so important. They teach skills that you can't get in anything else. They are in no way lesser subject areas than the quote unquote core classes. They are classes that you should have, as a kid, you should be taking for as long as you can. And
Should the schools require it, in my opinion, through middle school? Absolutely. They absolutely should. The fact that we have kids in our school that take no music ever from 6th to 8th grade, or are in no personal wellness from 6th to 8th grade, I think that's just ridiculous. I really do. And it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And these kids aren't developing parts of their brains and their body that they really should be doing during those years. And I teach in a school that, quite honestly, has a great setup, and that it's great that they get options to do these things. And I think very highly of my school. And there are many, many other schools that don't even offer music, don't even offer phy-ed, don't require either one. And so it's unfortunate. We need this in our kids. We look at our society today. We look at the problems we face in our culture. We look at how people can't communicate with each other. How if we have a different opinion than somebody, we just automatically hate them instead of trying to open up into a conversation. We look at the technology that we are developing, and how are we going to keep that going? Who's going to have the creative spirit to come up with new ideas to push our culture forward in a positive way? I look at how we have a hard time problem solving. We have a hard time dealing with teamwork. I look at how obese our country is, and how we live unhealthy lifestyles, and how a lot of times the solutions that we present have nothing to do with trying to live more healthy. We look to drugs and certain surgical procedures and all sorts of stuff, where it's just like, you know what, if you just lived a healthier life, if you ate better, if you exercised, if you got involved in a rec sport of some sort, you would live such a better life. So it's disappointing. I think we're setting kids up for failure by not requiring the arts and physical education throughout middle school and into high school. And we need to ask ourselves, why? Why are we doing that? Why are we pushing the cores? Why are we pushing STEM? Anyway, I'll leave you with that thought, and hopefully you can give that some thought too. And feel free to email me, or get onto my Twitter account. I'd love to discuss this further with anybody who wants to. I'm at Twitter at Eric Songer, and my email is songer@songerstudio.com. Have a great one, and we'll see you next week for Second Floor Therapy.